Hey, this is Dave Pryor. We are at the end of day 2 here at Agile 2019. We've been doing interviews in the booth all week long with speakers and thought leaders and other folks that are helping bringing change to the world of work. Eric Rapin is here. I really want to say it the fancy way. Say it the fancy way.
Rapin?
There we go. I can't do that. All right.
But I'm American, so, we say Rapin.
All right, Rapin. Eric B. Rapin. So you're coach, you're certified Scrum trainer.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about retrospectives.
Yep.
And retrospectives are something you're supposed to be doing all the time. And if you're not doing them, you've kind of abandoned Agile in its entirety. But many people who are doing them aren't doing them very well.
No, that is for sure.
So what's your biggest concern about retrospectives?
Usually if I bring it up to people, like I do a lot of Scrum trainings and I'll talk about retrospectives in there, and they will ask me to elaborate a little bit. What do you mean you have to design them and facilitate them? And I'm like, oh yeah, you have to put some work into them.
Okay, so I've never even thought of them this way. When you say design them, what do you mean?
Well, you have to design the interactions. So if you've got, let's go to what most common complaints are, right?
Okay.
People don't talk.
Same stuff every time.
We talk about the same things all the time. The same people talk every time. And we're always talking about the same problems, and we never fix them.
Right.
So then what ends up happening is you squeeze the retrospective down as small as you can get away with until, like, for example, I was sometimes as a coach, they invite me to observe a meeting and then give feedback after. And there was a client that had a 10-minute retrospective. The Scrum Master spoke the whole time.
Oh.
And I didn't see any concrete actions coming out of that.
Wow.
And so you think, well, yeah, of course not, because nobody else was engaged.
Yeah.
So the design is knowing who your team is and what kinds of issues are going on and how much trust there is.
Okay.
You put some effort into how that interaction is going to take place.
Okay.
So if you have people who don't normally talk, then you find activities, methods to get them to, engage more. So like silent writing or...
Well, I was going to say, you're not going to... I know some people that require everyone to talk in their retrospective. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, I think any kind of coercion is going to give you, shut down behaviors.
Yeah,
People
or bad data.
Or bad data, or they'll just tell you what they think you want to hear.
Right.
And you don't get anywhere. You don't really get into the real problems. I've had people say, well, we kind of fixed everything, so we didn't need them anymore. And I'm like, that would be awesome if that were true.
Yeah, we're agile enough that we don't have to fix anything.
I'm having some doubts about whether that's true, because we're human and we're always looking for ways to improve if you are willing to. So I had a great experience, though, when I was at Adobe. And it was, sometimes people invite me and say, hey, can you come and facilitate a retrospective?
Right.
I want to participate and I want to be separate. And that's the other key part is, besides design, is the facilitation of it.
Okay.
And that's a really hard skill to develop. Really effectively
facilitate. But don't you think that that's the Scrum Master's responsibility?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And they are the first, although anybody can do it. And I think a good, healthy team would rotate that responsibility around. I think it would be useful if everybody
was okay
develop
with that.
the skills and we're willing to do it.
Okay.
I would never coerce someone into do it. Same reason you don't want to coerce somebody to be a Scrum Master.
Or to do Agile.
Or to any kind of coercion. And, it's like people, that just builds resistance.
Yeah.
So I got invited, hey, will you come facilitate? So it was a group of consultants all on the East Coast. In fact, I did it in Alexandria, not too far from here.
Okay.
And they all lived in various places around the East Coast. They all flew in. And the reason they brought me in, and this is unusual, usually when I get asked to do this, it's usually not a good thing. It's usually there's something really going bad.
There's only one time that I asked someone else to do lead a retrospective for me, and it was because stuff was so broken we couldn't figure out how to fix it.
So these guys invited me in because things had gone really well.
Oh.
And because they're consultants and they often are forming teams around projects as opposed to forming work around the teams, it's just sort of the nature of consulting work. At least that's how it's usually structured.
Yeah.
These guys were wondering, what was it that made this project wildly successful? 6 months project. I think there were probably 7 or 8 people on the team.
Right.
And so we did 4 hours. So it's like, all right, we're going to talk about a 6-month period. The design needs to cover a bigger chunk of time.
Okay.
So your retrospective should always be proportional to the time span we're discussing and the number of people in the room. Okay. And so we allocated 4 hours. I came in and they invited, this was really interesting, they invited their management to sit in the back and just watch.
That seems unsound.
It seemed unsafe to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to explain why, if you create, just to see if we're on the same page here, it's a private space just for the team to air whatever they have to air, hopefully in a constructive manner, figure out what they want to change and figure out how they're going to improve. And if you've got management in the room, nobody's going to be honest. Or it's unlikely.
They tend to minimize the bad and amplify the good because they're trying to impress.
Right.
And it's nothing sort of inherently evil about it. It's just an inclination that occurs.
Yeah.
And some people won't open up at all.
Okay.
Right? It's unsafe. So
But
I
these
thought this
guys
was
had
really...
they had a good time, though.
They had a good...
They wanted to amplify
and
some
they
stuff.
really wanted the management to learn the lessons they were about to learn.
Okay.
Because they wanted to discover what was so good about this last 6-month project.
Okay.
So I had this 4-hour design. I can't even remember what the activities were, but we did a whole bunch of stuff to kind of tease through helping them. And that's the facilitation, right? I mean, what does it mean to facilitate? To make easy,
Okay.
right? And my job there was to help them figure out
What was going
what
on.
was true for them.
Okay.
What was and what was true and what did they see about it?
Okay.
And by the end, the conclusion was really amazing. They said that the reason why it was such a successful project is because it was like they were an intact team.
Okay.
Because I think about 3/4 of the group, maybe more, had all worked together on various projects over the past 10 years.
Okay.
So even though they weren't always on the same projects together,
They knew each other. They had trust.
they had trust, they had safety amongst themselves.
Okay.
They felt comfortable with each other. They knew what to expect from each other, like a team.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was kind of an interesting message for the consulting group going, I know teaming is hard in those kind of that sort of organization, but there's definitely and this was all stuff they came up with. This just surfaced during the retro.
I think having worked in those kind of organizations with people like that, I think it is really hard. But if you've got the guy that you worked with 8 months ago, I mean, once you have that connection, you know the person that's coming back doesn't suck and that you can work with them, it's like a quicker trust maybe.
Yeah, you get there faster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the it's the old Tuckman curve, right?
Yeah.
How fast can you get to that performing level?
Yeah. And if
Well,
you're a consultant, you really don't have a choice because you got to find a way to get there fast.
It's actually one of the things when I have consultants in my classes, I always appreciate the fact that they tend not to stay in their silo.
Yeah.
They tend to want to just make things happen and take responsibility for things, which is, a great trait for anybody on a team for owning things, right? But, usually what I find is that people might have discovered, you can actually do an activity in a retrospective. So they run start, stop, continue. Mm-hmm. Start, stop, continue. And they run it over and over again.
And then it stops working.
Well, I learned from Human Systems Dynamics, which is the work of Glenda Aoyang. She's actually here at the conference this week.
Okay.
Doing a talk with Jeremy Lightsmith, I think.
Okay.
On HSD stuff.
Cool.
I did her course a few years ago and read her books. And there was a line in there that she talked about, if you think about complex systems, there's attractors in complex systems, different types of attractors. Point attractors like a deadline, we're all focused on this point.
Yeah.
And cyclic attractors like Scrum.
Okay.
Right, it has a pattern to it. It's
repeats,
cyclical, right? And I'm reading along, and I get to this point where it says, cyclic attractors create resistance. And I thought, oh God, we're screwed.
Why? Wait, why though?
Because it's the old best analogy I could come up with is, if you took your arm and you rubbed it, and you kept doing it, and you kept doing it.
Yeah.
After a while, the skin on your arm kind of goes numb.
Yeah.
That's what I think that's like. If you do the same thing over and over. So then I thought about it.
But not necessarily the pattern of the rhythm of something like Scrum, but it's the same retrospective. It'd be like eating the same food every single meal.
And so at that point, I realized I'm like, that's why when you run the same retrospective activity over and over and over again, people learn how to give just enough to get out of it.
To get it over with, yeah.
To get it over with, because especially if it's not leading to improvement.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do really good design and really well facilitated retrospectives,
right.
That lead to results, because that's the point, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to get better. So if it actually is leading to improvement, people enthusiastically show up and they amp up their participation because it's working for them.
Okay.
Because in the end, if it's not working for you,
you shouldn't do it.
Why are we doing it?
Do you? One of the things that I believe, and I don't know if other people would agree with it, is that in a retro, you obviously want all the things that you just talked about, but I do think that there's a certain amount of, for lack of a more polite word, bitching that has to go on.
Oh, absolutely.
Because people have to get that out of their systems. But there is a kind of a fine point where it suddenly becomes unhealthy.
Well, that's where the facilitation skill comes in.
Okay.
I had a great line from the original Retrospectives book, Project Retrospectives by Norm Kurth. He says, your job as a facilitator is to facilitate complaint energy and turn it into action.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So your job is to somehow navigate through that till you come out the other side with something useful to do that they choose.
Okay.
Because you don't own the content, you own the process.
Right.
You're just facilitating.
Okay.
Which is why it's hard if the Scrum Master is also on the dev team.
Yeah.
Because now they're not neutral.
Right.
So I always argue, like, if you're going to be in that kind of environment where your roles are kind of overloaded, find a partner.
Okay.
Partner with another Scrum Master. Have them facilitate yours.
Oh, that's good.
And you facilitate theirs. That way you can participate in yours and be neutral in theirs.
Cool. Okay. One more question about this.
Sure.
Because they waved the flag thing. Do you have a particular go-to format that you really enjoy, you think provides a lot of value, or even if it's only value for you?
When I am first doing a retrospective for a team and I've never done it for before, I have a go-to pattern that I like to use. One, I always start with the prime directive to set the tone. So we set the stage that way. And then I always like to use something I learned from Diana Larson called FRIM.
Okay.
Frequency and impact. A lot of people do timeline, but FRIM is you have people write for a couple of minutes what happened during the sprint, and then you place it on a chart that shows how often it happened and what was the positive or negative impact.
Okay.
And when you look at that always negative stuff in the bottom right corner of the chart, it's like, so usually what I do is I step back and say, what is this picture telling you? And they're like, oh, this bottom right corner looks really bad. I'm like, okay. And then we usually will take those items and move them into another exercise called Circles and Soup.
Okay.
Which is another one I learned from Diana. And that one has a lot to do with what you have control over.
Okay.
So the center circle is we have direct control over these things.
Okay.
The inner ring is we have influence on them. And the outer ring is what she calls the soup.
You have no control at all.
The only thing you can do in the soup is decide how to respond to it.
Okay.
You can be deliberate about your response.
And those would be those problems that we just can't fix because they're beyond our control.
It's like the culture of your organization.
Yeah.
Just the immovable objects, the forces. And then we'll group and vote and narrow it down, and then we'll craft an action out of that. And that's a kind of a go-to pattern that I like to use. Unless I've done it with them before. I always try to mix it up a little bit. Do you automatically
change every time, or do you
not necessarily
until it stops being valuable?
I did that same pattern with a team once, and then they invited me to come back several sprints later, and I decided to repeat it to be able to compare it.
Changed.
And it was an interesting thing because in the first round, the center ring was packed full of stuff they could do themselves.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, the picture was, oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can fix.
Okay.
So I'm like, and the energy in the room went up. They were all looking like our world is terrible.
Yeah.
We have nothing in our control, and management,
then they figured out
they all kind of straightened up. And they're like, we could fix all this stuff. I came back and the middle ring was empty almost.
Wow. That's powerful.
And everything was out in the influence. And I said, hey, compared to last time, guys, what is this telling you? We cleaned house.
Yeah. Cool.
And now we're ready to push out on the rest of the world.
Okay.
I thought that was pretty awesome.
So if folks want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, I've got my website, lucidagile.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Twitter as EB Rapin.
Okay.
And I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
Cool. Well, dude, thank you very much.
Yeah,
one, do your retrospectives. Two, if they're not working, change the format. You got a third one we can offer them?
Learn how to facilitate.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, man. This was
all right.
great. Appreciate you coming by.